All right, hey there. So glad you could join us. It looks like you folks have sent in a really, really cool collection of resources, and they all seem to be pointing in the same direction.
Yeah, they do. Seems like everyone's trying to figure out the same thing. How to make their spoken English sound a bit less, well, textbooky.
Exactly, exactly. Less like they're reading from a script, more like they're,
Ah,
just chatting away.
right, just riffing. And that's kind of the core of what we'll be digging into during this deep dive. How to take all these amazing tips and tricks from your sources and use them to bridge that gap between, grammatically perfect English,
And the way native speakers actually, just talk.
that effortless flow, the kind of thing that makes you sound less like you're, well, consciously constructing sentences.
Exactly. And the material you guys sent covers a lot of ground, too. Like everything from the specific words we use to um, how we structure those sentences, and even like those tiny little conversational habits, those almost unconscious things that native speakers do, that can make all the difference.
Okay, so let's unpack this because I think we've all been there, right? You can have a massive vocabulary, your grammar can be totally spot on, but still, sometimes something feels off.
Yeah, totally. Like you're missing that secret ingredient, that certain je ne sais quoi.
You got it. So, like, where do we even begin to unlock that, to sound less foreign and just more, well, natural?
Well, one place to start might be how native speakers give advice or make suggestions.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
They rarely just come right out and, lay down the law. There's a real art to softening the blow, so to speak.
Right, right. So, according to the stuff you've been looking at, we should probably steer clear of those hard-hitting you should and you must kind of statements.
Yeah, they can come off a bit strong, a bit dictatorial. Totally. So what are some gentler ways to, get our point across? What are some good alternatives?
Well, your sources highlighted a bunch of really good options. So, for example, instead of saying you should call them back right away, you might hear something like, how about giving them a call back a bit later?
Okay, yeah.
It just feels less like an order, right? It kind of opens up the possibility that, well, maybe they'll call back, maybe they won't. It's up to them.
Right. It's more of a suggestion, like a nudge in the right direction.
Exactly. Or another one is like, instead of saying you should check online, which can sound a bit bossy, you could say it might be worth checking online. They often have more info there.
Oh, I like that. That's much softer for sure.
It is. And it's not just about being polite either. It actually reflects a bigger cultural value of avoiding being too pushy, and giving the other person more space to make their own decisions. Direct commands can sometimes feel a bit presumptuous, like you're assuming too much authority, especially depending on who you're talking to and the situation.
Right. Totally. Makes sense. It's about guiding, not commanding.
Exactly. Guiding, suggesting, hinting, it's all about nuance.
Nuance is key.
Yeah.
So any other softer approaches your sources mentioned that we should keep in mind?
Yeah, definitely. For instance, instead of bluntly saying, you must look at that report again, which nobody wants to hear,
Oh, for sure not.
you might say, you might want to have a look at that report again. There were a few errors.
That's much better.
It is, right? It softens the blow a bit. And even something like, you really need to proofread your work more carefully can be more effective than the flat out, you must proofread your work.
That last one still has a bit of an edge to it.
It does, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's more of a strong suggestion or a warning than like a non-negotiable command,
Look.
It leaves a little wiggle room.
Right, right. Yeah, I see the difference. Okay, cool. So softening the blow. What else did your sources suggest we look at?
Well, they also talked about how native speakers express emotions in a more, immediate way, using those short, punchy what statements.
Ah, yes. Those are awesome. They're so concise, but they really pack a punch. They're kind of like instant emotion downloads.
Exactly. They tap into this very visceral way of expressing how you feel. It's less about describing the emotion and more about just letting it out. And that's a big part of sounding more natural, less like you're overthinking it.
Okay, so how do we do this? Give us some examples of how we can use these statements to, sound more, I don't know, expressive, maybe.
Well, think about it. Instead of just saying, the weather is lovely today, a native speaker might say, what a lovely day. Or instead of, that's a shame, they might say, what a shame. You see, it's just more immediate, more heartfelt.
Oh, yeah, I get it. It's like you're reacting in the moment instead of just stating a fact.
Exactly. So, for example, if you were invited to a dinner but couldn't make it, you might say, what a shame you can't make it to the dinner.
Yeah, I actually see that one all the time.
See? It's already in your repertoire.
It is. It is. I guess I've been doing this all along.
You have. It's instinctive. And you can use it for like all sorts of emotions, like annoyance, for example. Imagine someone does something careless and you say, what a silly thing to do.
Yeah, I can hear myself saying that. Or like, what a waste of time when something doesn't go as planned.
Exactly. Or on the flip side, when something truly blows you away, like what an amazing present, thank you, it really amplifies that positive energy.
I love it. Short, sweet, and to the point. And the sources also mentioned that we can even boost these what statements for even more emphasis, right? How do we do that?
Oh, absolutely. You can like really underscore the noun with words like total. So imagine something goes completely wrong. Instead of just saying what a disaster, you could say what a total disaster.
Oh, yeah, I can feel that total, just adding that extra oomph.
Right. And similarly, you can use adverbs like totally to intensify the adjective. So, what an incredible view becomes what a totally incredible view when you're just completely awestruck.
Got it. Okay, I'm totally adding these to my conversational arsenal. What else? What else? What other tricks do native speakers have up their sleeves?
Well, your sources pointed out that native speakers often use it statements for everyday, casual comments. Those little observations we make all the time.
Yeah.
And it's funny because learners often start these sentences with like, I think that, or I'm feeling, which can sound a tad formal in informal settings.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the sources making that contrast, and it was so clear. It's like, instead of, I am happy that you came, it's just, it's great that you're here. It's so much more natural that way.
Exactly. It is. And it just sounds more relaxed, more off the cuff, like, you're not overthinking it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's a good thing we brought umbrellas. Just sounds so much smoother than, we are lucky we brought umbrellas.
Totally. And the cool thing is you can use these it statements in all sorts of tenses and moods, like, it was great seeing you last night.
I think it's going to rain later.
It would be wonderful to see you again soon, you see. It just works across the board. And if we, zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, these it statements are often a way of shifting the focus away from, like, the speaker's direct experience and more towards a general observation or feeling about a situation.
Interesting. It's less me, and more about the shared experience.
Exactly. And that can make your English sound more, I don't know, integrated, maybe? Like you're not just talking about yourself, but about the world around you.
Oh, I like that. It's more inclusive, more like you're part of the conversation, not just like broadcasting your own thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. So yeah, it's statements, definitely a good one to practice.
All right, noted. So moving on, let's talk about softeners, those little words that can like totally change the vibe of a sentence. What's their deal? Why do we sprinkle these in?
So softeners, like kind of, sort of, and a bit, are all about making our language a bit less, absolute, a bit less in your face, especially when we're trying to be polite or when we're expressing something that's like, not totally black and white.
Right. So like if I want to express an opinion that might not be super popular or maybe say something a bit negative without, being too harsh, these can help me do that.
Absolutely. For example, instead of saying this movie is boring, which sounds kind of brutal, you could say this movie is kind of boring. You see, it just takes the edge off.
Yeah, kind of. Definitely softens the blow a bit.
It does, and sort of works the same way. Like, I sort of understand what you mean, suggests that you're getting there, but maybe not quite all the way.
It leaves some room for interpretation, and a bit does the same thing, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, saying someone is a bit late is much gentler than just flat out saying he's late.
Right. It downplays the lateness a bit.
It does. And you can even use a bit of a with nouns. Like, instead of saying the wait was annoying, you could say the wait was a bit of a pain. It just sounds less whiny, less aggressive.
It does. It does. It's amazing how these tiny little words can make such a difference.
It really is. It's all about nuance and, like, reading the room.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to tag questions, those little things we stick on the end of sentences like, isn't it, or right. What's the native speaker's take on these?
Oh, tag questions. They're like the bread and butter of British English, but you'll hear them in American English too, often as like, right, or huh. And they serve a few different purposes, like they can be a way of checking if someone's listening or if they agree with you. But sometimes it's just about, keeping the conversation flowing, making it feel more interactive.
Right, so it's not always about actually needing confirmation. It's more about creating that back and forth, that sense of connection.
Exactly. Like if you say, it's a beautiful day, isn't it? You're not really asking a question. You're just, like, inviting the other person to share in your appreciation of the day.
Yeah, it's like a little verbal nudge, a way of saying, hey, we're in this together, you know?
Exactly. And there are loads of other tag questions, too, like, this coffee is really good, isn't it? Or, you've been working hard today, haven't you?
Or even like, he didn't do a very good job, did he? When you're, maybe a little bit critical, but still want to get the other person's opinion.
Right, exactly. And notice how often we use a little opposite tag at the end, like, it's a nice day, isn't it? Positive statement, negative tag. They haven't arrived yet, have they? Negative statement, positive tag.
Yeah, there's definitely a pattern there. And I remember the sources mentioned that general rule about positive statements having negative tags and vice versa, right?
That's usually the case, yeah. But it's not a hard and fast rule, more of a, like, general tendency.
Right, right. It's more about the overall vibe than about being grammatically perfect. Okay, cool. So, tag questions, check. What's next on the list?
Well, the sources also talked about how native speakers often shorten questions in informal settings, which can be, quite a departure from what learners are taught.
Yeah, that was a good one. It can sound super casual, almost like you're chopping off half the sentence.
It does, doesn't it? And it's all about dropping those auxiliary verbs like are you, do you, have you, when you're asking a direct question.
Okay. Can you give us a few examples of how this plays out in real life?
For sure. So instead of saying, are you going to the concert tonight? You might hear, you going to the concert tonight? Or even just, going to the concert tonight.
Wow, that's pretty direct.
It is, right. And it works with all sorts of questions. Like, did you see that new movie? Becomes, see that new movie and have you finished your work? Turns into, finished your work.
It's like you're cutting to the chase, getting straight to the point.
Exactly. It's a way of being more efficient with your language and, like, showing a certain level of familiarity with the person you're talking to.
Right. It assumes you're both on the same page.
Exactly. Okay, so another interesting tip from your sources was about softening questions by starting with so and ending with then.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's like you're easing into the question, making it sound less, confrontational.
You got it. And it's a really common way for native speakers to, like, be a bit more considerate, especially when they're asking about something that could be, I don't know, maybe a little personal or sensitive.
So instead of just blurting out, what did you do this weekend? You'd say, so what did you get up to this weekend then?
Exactly. The so at the beginning is like a little buffer, and the then at the end adds a touch of, gentle expectation.
It takes the pressure off a bit, doesn't it? It's less like an interrogation and more like a friendly inquiry.
It does. And you can also use this so-then structure to confirm something you've heard or understood, often with a tag question at the end.
Interesting. Like you might say, so you're not coming after all then, are you? It's a very natural way of checking in and making sure you're both on the same page.
Oh, I like that. It's subtle but effective. So we've talked about how to ask questions in a more natural way. What about how we answer them? Your sources suggest that we should try to go beyond a simple yes or no.
Absolutely. One-word answers can sound a bit robotic, a bit abrupt, especially in informal conversations.
Yeah, I guess it can make you seem like you're not really interested or engaged in the conversation.
Exactly. Native speakers will often elaborate a bit, even if the answer is still fairly concise.
Okay, so what are some good ways to do that? Give us some examples.
So, for example, instead of just saying, yes, you could say, yes, I do, or absolutely, or even I hope so, or sure. And for negative answers, instead of just no, you could try, no, I'm afraid not, or I don't think so, or I hope not. And of course, there's always the classic no way for those times when you really want to express disbelief or surprise. Right, right. Those definitely sound more natural and engaged. Like you're actually thinking about the question and giving a genuine response.
Exactly. They add a little personality to your answers, too.
They do.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about contractions, those little time savers that we all learn in English class. But they can sometimes feel a bit, I don't know, awkward to use in real life.
Right. They're everywhere in native speech, but it can take some practice to get comfortable using them naturally.
It's true. I remember feeling like I was trying too hard when I first started using them. But the sources really emphasized how essential contractions are for sounding natural. Like they're not just an option, they're practically a requirement.
Totally. Like if you always say, I'm going instead of I'm going, or it is raining instead of it's raining,
Oh,
you're going to sound like you're reading from a textbook.
right. And the sources provided a ton of examples, like a whole laundry list of how contractions are used in everyday speech. Can we go through a few of those just to drive the point home?
Absolutely. So here are a few. Just give you a taste. Coffee's better with milk. London's not that far. Dave's had a bad week. My wife's always busy. And then there are questions like, when's the best time to call? What time's your meeting? How's your new job?
Yeah, and even longer ones like, the person I know's name is Sarah.
Right. And let's not forget the super common ones like, it's a shame about the weather. It's been ages since we've seen each other. I'll call you later. Who's coming to the party? And I'd love to meet your family. You see, contractions are everywhere.
They really are. Hearing them all like that really makes you realize how unnatural it sounds to avoid them.
Totally. It's like speaking with a stiff upper lip.
Okay, so we've got the standard contractions down. What about those super casual ones like gonna, wanna, gotta? Those can feel a little, I don't know, risky to use, like you might sound unprofessional or something.
Yeah, I get that. They're definitely more informal, best saved for chats with friends or family or, in relaxed social settings. You probably wouldn't use them in a job interview or when you're giving a presentation.
Right, right. There's definitely a time and place for those.
hmm
But when the situation's right, they can sound supernatural.
Totally. And it's good to be aware of them, even if you don't use them yourself all the time, so you can understand what other people are saying.
For sure. So how about some examples of how these ultra-casual contractions work in sentences?
All right, so imagine you're heading out the door and you say, I'm just going to pop out for a few minutes. Or maybe you're feeling lazy and you say, I'm not going to bother with that. And then there's the classic, I've just got to finish this email, or I just want to relax tonight.
And I don't want to go home yet
Yeah.
when you're having too much fun.
Exactly. They're all about expressing those everyday desires and intentions in a super relaxed, informal way.
Okay, so contractions, from formal to super casual, check. What's next on the list of native speaker secrets?
Well, something else your sources pointed out is that native speakers tend to use more pronouns and fewer repeated nouns, which can make their speech sound less repetitive and more flowing.
Yeah, that was a good one. I remember the example they gave where someone kept repeating Italian restaurant over and over again, and it sounded so unnatural.
Right. It's like, we get it. It's an Italian restaurant. You don't have to keep saying it.
Exactly. It's much
Yeah.
more natural to just say it once and then use it or the restaurant to refer back to it.
You got it. Like, instead of saying, my friend Sarah went to the new Italian restaurant and Sarah said the Italian restaurant was excellent, I think everyone should try the Italian restaurant. You'd say, my friend Sarah went to the new Italian restaurant and she said it was excellent. I think everyone should try it.
Oh, yeah, that's so much better. It just flows, doesn't it?
It does. It's all about being concise and avoiding redundancy.
Makes sense. And the sources even had like a whole mini conversation demonstrating how pronouns just naturally take over once a person or thing has been mentioned.
Right, exactly. It's like, well, once we've established what we're talking about, we don't need to keep spelling it out every time.
Right. We can just use those handy little pronouns to keep things moving along smoothly. Okay, so pronouns, check. What else did your sources highlight?
They also talked about shortening past modals, especially when we're like, talking about things we wish we'd done differently or things that could have happened but didn't.
Ah, yes, those woulda, coulda, shoulda moments.
Exactly. And it's funny because these are often taught in their full form, like would have, could have, should have. But in real life, native speakers often shorten them, especially when they're speaking quickly or casually.
Right. It's much easier to say woulda than would have
Yeah.
when you're like lamenting a missed opportunity.
Totally. And there's even a subtle difference in how we pronounce these shortened forms depending on the word that comes after them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we tend to use the A sound, like in woulda, before consonants, as in I should have gone to bed earlier, and the I've sound, which can sound a bit like would've before vowels, as in I could have asked for help.
Interesting. So it's not just about shortening the words, it's also about like fine-tuning the pronunciation for an even more natural sound.
Exactly. It's those little details that make a big difference.
Cool. So how about some examples of these shortened past modals in action?
Okay, so imagine you're stuck in traffic and you say, we would have been on time if the traffic hadn't been so bad. Or maybe you're telling a funny story and you say, you should have seen his face. It was priceless.
Or when you're like kicking yourself for a mistake, I should have listened to my gut feeling.
Exactly. And there's also, I could have sworn I left my keys on the table, or he must have forgot about our meeting.
And she must have been really tired to explain someone's behavior.
You got it. It's all about expressing those past possibilities and regrets in a more concise, informal way.
Perfect. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about something that can be a bit tricky filler words. I know we're often told to avoid them, but your sources actually suggest that we should embrace them. To a certain extent, of course.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot. Because the thing is, filler words like, like, so are a natural part of how people talk, you know?
Yeah, when you hear someone speaking without any fillers at all, it can sound a bit robotic, bit rehearsed.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like they're reading from a script.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to sound like that.
Right. So what's the deal with fillers? What's their purpose?
Well, they give us a little time to think, to gather our thoughts before we speak. And they also signal to the listener that we're not finished talking, even if we pause for a second.
Okay. So they're not necessarily a sign that we don't know what to say or that we're not confident in what we're saying.
Not at all. In fact, they can actually make you sound more confident because they show that you're comfortable taking your time and thinking things through.
Right, right. It's like you're not rushing to fill the silence, you're owning it.
Exactly. And they also contribute to that overall relaxed conversational tone, especially when we're telling stories or anecdotes.
Okay, so fillers are good, but the key is moderation, right?
Absolutely. Too many fillers can be distracting and can actually make you sound less confident, like you're struggling to find the right words.
Right. I remember the sources had this hilarious example of a sentence overloaded with fillers. And he was like, So I was like, thinking, maybe like we could, go to the new restaurant.
It was painful. I mean, it was funny, but also kind of painful to listen to.
Totally. It's definitely possible to go overboard.
But used sparingly, fillers can actually enhance your fluency and make you sound more natural.
Okay, so fillers in moderation. Check. What else? What else? What other tips did the sources suggest?
Well, they also talked about those little phrases we sometimes tack on to the end of sentences, like and stuff or something and all of that.
Yes, those casual round-offs.
Exactly. They're a very informal way of saying etc. or and other things.
And they're so common in native speech, it's like you barely even notice them.
Right. It's just part of that casual conversational flow. And they're super easy to use. Like you might say, I need to pick up some groceries, bread, milk and stuff.
Or we could go to the park or the beach or something.
I spent all afternoon cleaning the house and all that, you see. It's a super casual way of indicating that you're not going to list every single thing.
Exactly. It keeps things light and breezy. And speaking of keeping things flowing, let's talk about linking words. These are like the glue that holds our sentences and ideas together, right?
They are. Linking words and phrases like and, but, so then, because, that's why, are all about creating a smoother, more connected flow in our speech, especially in casual conversation and when we're telling stories.
Yeah, I remember the sources pointing out that we can use these linking words in the middle of sentences, but also at the beginning, which is something that learners sometimes don't realize.
Right, and it can make a big difference in how natural your English sounds.
Absolutely. So how about some examples of how we can use these linking words effectively?
Okay, so in the middle of a sentence, you might say, I was planning to stay in, but then Sarah called and we decided to go out. You see how those little words, but then, and, connect the different parts of the sentence?
Yeah, they make it feel like a story unfolding, like one thing leads to another.
Exactly. And at the beginning of a sentence, you might say, so then what happened next was, or, and that's why I was late this morning.
Or even, but anyway, where were we? When you want to bring the conversation back on track.
Exactly. Linking words are all about creating that sense of cohesion, of showing how our ideas are connected.
They're like those little bridges that help us get from one thought to the next.
Totally. Okay, so now let's talk about something that can really level up your English and make you sound more sophisticated, noun phrases.
Noun phrases.
Yeah, they're a bit more grammatically complex, but once you get the hang of them, they can really elevate your speaking and make you sound more like a native speaker.
Interesting. I'm all ears.
So the thing is, learners often use a lot of pronouns and verbs in their sentences. Like they might say, I enjoy listening to music when I'm relaxing. Do you also enjoy listening to music when you're relaxing?
Yeah, that sounds kind of wordy and repetitive.
It does, doesn't it? Native speakers would probably say something more like, listening to music while relaxing is great, isn't it? They'd use a noun phrase, listening to music while relaxing, as the subject of the sentence.
Okay, I see. So it's about packing more information into a shorter, more concise phrase.
Exactly. And you can even use it phrases to reorder the sentence and make it sound even more natural. Like, it's great, isn't it, listening to music while relaxing?
Oh yeah, that sounds really smooth.
It does, doesn't it? It's a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference.
Cool. Noun phrases, check. All right, so what else is there? What other tricks do native speakers use to make their English sound more, well, interesting and engaging?
Well, something that's really important is exaggeration. Native speakers are not afraid to, amp things up a bit to emphasize a point or express strong feelings.
Right. It's like we're not just stating facts, we're adding our own commentary, our own emotional spin on things.
Exactly. So instead of saying the movie was good, you might say the movie was amazing. Or if you were really disappointed, you wouldn't just say the food was bad, you'd say the food was terrible.
Right. And we often use adverbs like absolutely and totally to like really hammer home the point.
Totally. Like the party was absolutely incredible, or she looked totally stunning.
Yeah. Exaggeration is definitely a key ingredient in making our speech more lively and expressive. And speaking of amping things up, the sources also talked about repeating adverbs for dramatic effect.
Right, like saying, I'm very, very tired, to really emphasize your exhaustion, or I'm so, so grateful for your help to show how much you appreciate it.
It's like you're doubling down on the adverb to make your feelings extra clear.
Exactly. And it can be super effective for creating that sense of heightened emotion or urgency.
Right. And we also use adverbs with and to create that sense of repetition or ongoing action.
Totally. Like, he asked me again and again to help him, or the children ran round and round the garden.
Okay, cool. So exaggeration and repeated adverbs, check. What else? What else?
Oh, your sources also mentioned something called binomials, which are these fixed two-word phrases that are super common in native English.
Binomials. I've never heard of those before.
They're everywhere. Like, think of phrases like salt and pepper, knife and fork, odds and ends, more or less. They're just these little pairings that have become so ingrained in the language that we don't even think about them, and they can instantly make your English sound more idiomatic and natural.
Okay. I'm starting to see the pattern here. It's all about those little chunks of language that native speakers just know instinctively and that learners have to kind of piece together one by one.
Exactly. It's like learning the secret code of English. All right, so you know we love diving deep into the materials you send us, and today's pick is really fascinating. And the title, and this is kind of a mouthful, is B1 English Listening Practice: How to Start Talking in English, Improve Your English Skills.
Wow.
But the reason I picked this one is because, we get so many questions, and I know from personal experience that understanding English and actually speaking it can feel like two completely different worlds.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. It's a common struggle, right? Like you can read an article, understand a movie, maybe even write pretty well.
Right.
But then when it comes to actually opening your mouth and speaking, it's like hitting a wall.
Total brain freeze. And that's what this transcript digs into. So for our deep dive today, it's not about just going over what it says, but pulling out those core strategies, those real gems that help you, the listener, unlock your speaking potential.
Exactly. It's like providing you with a shortcut. Why does speaking feel so hard? What are the mental blocks? And most importantly, what are the practical, actionable steps you can take to start feeling more confident and speaking more fluently, starting like right now?
Yes. Think of it like us going through all the information, picking out those aha moments, the key takeaways, and handing them straight to you.
Love that.
Ready to get started.
Definitely. Let's dive in. So right off the bat, the transcript dives into this feeling so many learners have. The understanding is there, but the speaking just doesn't seem to follow.
It's like being stuck, right? You know you have the knowledge, but you just can't seem to access it when you need to actually speak.
Absolutely, and it's so frustrating. But the transcript makes a really interesting point. It says, one of the biggest things holding people back is the fear of making mistakes.
It's so true. It's like we have this idea that we need to be perfect before we can even open our mouths.
Right, like we have to have flawless grammar, a huge vocabulary, and a perfect accent before we can even attempt a sentence.
But you know what? The transcript reminds us that everyone makes mistakes, even native English speakers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about it. How often do you hear even fluent speakers, correcting themselves, restarting a sentence, or even just laughing off a little slip-up? It's totally normal.
It is. And in fact, the transcript makes this amazing point that those mistakes are actually crucial for learning.
It says that each time you make a mistake, your brain is actually figuring out how to say it better next time. Like literally your brain is learning from those errors.
Which is so different from how we're often taught to think about mistakes, right? It's like we're conditioned to avoid them at all costs. But this transcript is saying embrace those mistakes. They're valuable.
Exactly. Instead of being afraid of them, we need to see them as feedback. It's how we improve.
Okay, so we have this fear of making mistakes. But there's also, that whole issue of shyness, a lack of confidence. I think so many English learners struggle with this.
Oh, totally. I mean, feeling nervous when speaking a new language is totally normal. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it goes beyond that, right?
Right. It's that feeling of, oh gosh, I don't like how my voice sounds in English, or what if people laugh at my accent, or even I could never speak as well as so and so. It's like a downward spiral.
Definitely. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. You feel shy, so you speak less, which means you don't get enough practice, and then you feel even more shy and less confident.
And it's so easy to get caught in that cycle. But one thing the transcript does, which I think is so important, is reassure learners that these feelings are incredibly common.
Yes, it actually says that many English learners feel this way, and you are not alone. It's like a virtual hug saying, hey, it's okay to feel this way. We've all been there.
It's normalizing those feelings, which then allows us to start thinking about the real shift that needs to happen, moving away from the idea that we need to be perfect before we speak, and embracing the idea that we become better by speaking.
It's a total paradigm shift, isn't it?
It really is. And the transcript has this brilliant analogy. It says, you can read about swimming all day, but you will never learn until you get into the water.
Oh, I love that. It's so true. You can study grammar rules and vocabulary lists until you're blue in the face, but you won't become a fluent speaker until you actually start speaking.
It's about taking action, about getting in that metaphorical water and starting to swim.
Exactly. And just like swimming, speaking English takes practice. The more you do it, the better you become.
And it's important to remember that the whole process is about learning and growing. It's okay to make those splashes, to stumble a bit. It's all part of the journey.
Absolutely. So we've talked about some of the mental barriers, those things that make speaking feel so difficult. But what about the practical side of things? Where does this transcript suggest we actually start?
Well, the first piece of actionable advice it gives is to start with small and simple sentences.
Okay, so not trying to jump right into complex grammar structures and using every fancy word in the dictionary.
Exactly. It might seem almost too simple, but the transcript really emphasizes how powerful this can be for building confidence, especially at the beginning.
Makes sense. When you're not trying to juggle complex language, you can focus more on speaking clearly and confidently, right?
Precisely. And it gives some really practical, everyday examples of those small sentences. Things like, good morning, how are you? I'm fine, thank you, my name is Maria. Or even just, I'm Maria.
Those basic greetings and introductions, the building blocks of conversation.
Exactly. And it goes on to encourage learners to try describing their daily life, but using those short, straightforward phrases. Things like, I wake up at 7, I drink coffee, I go to work, I like music. Simple statements about your routine.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
It's taking those basic sentence structures and applying them to your own life, making them more personal and meaningful.
And it suggests a really practical exercise, saying maybe 5 to 10 of these small sentences about your day, even if it's just narrating to yourself while you're doing everyday things like cooking, walking, cleaning.
Talking to yourself.
Yeah, it might sound a little strange, but the transcript actually emphasizes that this isn't silly. It's about training your mouth and your brain. It gives examples like, I am cooking rice. It is a sunny day. I am going to the shop. Just basic descriptions of what you're doing.
So it's like building that muscle memory for speaking English, getting your mouth and your brain used to forming those words and sentences naturally.
Right. Just like when you're learning a new skill, like typing, at first you have to think about each keystroke, but with practice, your fingers just know where to go. It becomes automatic.
Interesting analogy. So with speaking, the more you practice these simple phrases, the easier it becomes to string them together into more complex sentences and ultimately hold a conversation, right?
Exactly. And the transcript makes a really important point here. It says, simple language is not weak, it is smart.
That's so important to remember. We often feel like we need to use big, complicated words to sound intelligent.
But in reality, even native speakers use simple language all the time. Think about it. I'm tired. Let's eat. Simple, effective communication.
It's about getting your message across clearly.
And it brings us back to the real goal here, which is to communicate, not to impress.
Right, to connect with other people using English.
And it connects this to your time. It makes the point that it's about consistency, not cramming. It says, speaking is like exercising. You don't get strong by going to the gym once a month.
It's about those small, regular efforts adding up over time. Like doing 10 push-ups a day is going to be more beneficial than trying to do 100 once a month and then collapsing from exhaustion.
Exactly. Building a habit of speaking, even in small ways, is what's going to make the difference. Okay, so we've got those first steps. But the transcript then moves into what it calls understanding the real problem,
Yeah.
and it argues that it might not be what we think.
Interesting. What does it mean by that?
Well, a lot of us, when we think about why we're not speaking fluently, we jump to things like, oh, I need to learn more grammar, or I need a bigger vocabulary.
Right. Yeah, that's usually the go-to explanation. Like, if I just had more knowledge, I could speak better.
But the transcript challenges that. It actually says the real problem is fear, a lack of confidence, and no speaking habit, even if you have a decent grasp of English.
So even if you know the rules and have the words, those other factors can hold you back.
Exactly. It talks about the power of fear, the fear of making those mistakes we talked about, that shyness, the worry that people might laugh, feeling self-conscious about your accent, just that general sense of not being ready.
It's like all these anxieties swirl around in your head and stop you from speaking, even when you technically have the ability to.
Right. And it talks about this trap we can fall into, waiting for this perfect day when we'll feel totally prepared to speak flawlessly.
Which, let's be honest, probably doesn't actually exist. There's always going to be something new to learn.
Exactly. And the transcript points out that English is not something you finish, it is something you practice.
You're constantly learning and evolving
And it says the longer you wait to speak, the more that fear can grow.
because you're not getting any experience to counter those negative thoughts.
Right. And then there's this whole other thing, not having a speaking habit.
Even if you spend hours reading, listening, and writing,
Yes. The transcript really emphasizes that speaking is a physical skill.
like playing an instrument or dancing.
Exactly. It involves training your mouth, your tongue, your vocal cords, and even those neural pathways in your brain.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You can read all the instructions in the world, but until you actually get on that bike and start pedaling, you won't truly learn.
Absolutely. So the big message here is start small, start now, don't wait, and don't try to be perfect. It's about using the English you already know, even if it's just little bits and pieces.
Right, like those simple descriptions of your day or even just pointing out things you see around you.
Even if it's just a single sentence, it's about breaking that inertia and starting to build that habit of speaking. So once we understand these roadblocks, the transcript guides us on how to address them with what it calls a mindset shift from fear to action.
Okay, so it's not enough just to understand the problem. We have to actively change our thinking.
Right. This whole section is about reframing our perspective on speaking English. It says instead of seeing mistakes as failures, we need to see them as part of learning.
As valuable feedback.
Exactly. It actually says that every mistake is like a small lesson.
So instead of being afraid of making mistakes, we should welcome them.
Yes. Because they're showing us what we need to work on. And it goes on to challenge this idea that we need to be perfect before we can speak.
Right, like waiting until we have this huge vocabulary and flawless grammar before we can even utter a word.
And it actually says the opposite, that confidence comes from speaking more, not studying more.
Which makes so much sense. The more you practice, the more confident you become.
Exactly. And it also encourages us to change how we think about English itself, not as a subject to be studied, but as a tool for communication.
Like a hammer or a phone. You don't need to know how they're made to use them effectively.
Right. You just need to know how to use them to accomplish what you need to. And this shift in focus from perfection to communication has a really positive effect.
Right.
The transcript says it reduces anxiety, it makes learning more enjoyable, and it encourages you to actually use the vocabulary you do have instead of constantly worrying about learning more.
It makes the process feel less intimidating and more rewarding.
And it highlights how even those small victories, successfully introducing yourself, asking a question, describing your morning routine, contribute to building your confidence.
Those little wins add up over time.
And it talks about the power of positive self-talk, like those little internal reminders. It's okay to make mistakes. You are learning. Focus on using English.
Encouraging that supportive inner voice.
Exactly. Okay, so we're starting to get our minds in the right place. But what about the practical side? What specific techniques does this transcript suggest?
Well, it addresses a really common assumption, which is that you absolutely need a speaking partner to improve your spoken English.
Right, that feeling of, I can't practice speaking until I find someone to talk to.
But the transcript says that's not true at all. It actually says you can start speaking English right now by yourself.
Which might come as a surprise to some people, but it goes on to explain how effective this can be.
Interesting. So how do you actually practice speaking English alone?
Well, it basically comes down to engaging in self-talk. Wherever you are in your room, in the shower, while you're cooking, walking.
Just talking to yourself.
Yes, and it even gives specific examples of what you can say, like describing your morning routine. Good morning, I'm going to take a shower now. Or narrating your actions while cooking. I am cutting the vegetables now, I am boiling water. Or even just talking through the process of getting ready. I am putting on my shoes, I need to take my bag.
Simple, everyday things.
Exactly. And it also suggests saying your thoughts or plans out loud, like, today I want to study English for 30 minutes, or I feel happy today because the weather is nice.
So it's about connecting the language to your internal world, making it more personal.
Right. And you can also describe what you see around you. This is my bed. It is soft and warm. There is a window. The sky is blue today. Just simple descriptions.
I can see how that would help build vocabulary and get you thinking more in English.
And what's really encouraging is that it says even just 5 minutes a day of this kind of self-talk can make a difference.
Wow, that's not a huge time commitment.
Right. The key is consistency. Make it a daily habit, like brushing your teeth. And it explains why this is so beneficial.
It's not just about getting over that feeling of awkwardness of talking to yourself.
Right. It's about training your brain to think in English, getting those muscles in your mouth and tongue used to forming the sounds.
Building that muscle memory for smoother speech.
Exactly. So you don't have to wait for that perfect speaking partner. You can start practicing right now just by talking to yourself.
Okay, I love that idea. It's so simple,
Yeah.
yet it makes so much sense. What else does the transcript suggest?
Well, it talks about this other really crucial piece of advice. Using the words you already know.
Interesting. A lot of learners feel like they need to learn a ton of new vocabulary before they can start speaking.
Exactly. But the transcript challenges that. It emphasizes using simple, clear English, the words that are already in your brain.
So not trying to force yourself to use big, complicated words you might not even fully understand.
Right. It actually says that even native speakers use very simple words in their everyday conversations.
Yeah, you think about it, a lot of our daily interactions are things like, I'm hungry, let's go, or I feel tired, or it's hot today.
Exactly. Simple, clear communication. And it gives an example of how you can simplify a sentence without losing meaning.
What's the example?
So like, I'm feeling extremely exhausted due to excessive workload becomes I'm very tired because of too much work.
Both get the point across.
Right. And it's just a practical exercise here too. Choose 5 or 10 common words you already know and make small sentences with them.
Okay, so like, I go to school every day, she eats lunch at noon, I am happy today, something like that.
Exactly. Just simple everyday sentences. And you can even describe your day using simple words like, this morning I woke up at 7, I brushed my teeth, I had breakfast, then I went to work.
It's about putting those basic building blocks together.
Right. And the message here is, you know more than you think. Use the words you have now. Don't wait to learn more before you start speaking.
So start small, start simple, and use what you already know. I love these practical tips. What else does the transcript recommend?
Well, it then goes on to talk about the importance of practicing speaking out loud daily.
That makes sense. It's like with any skill, the more you practice, the better you get.
Exactly. And it says this is a really powerful way to improve your fluency, your pronunciation, and your confidence.
And why is speaking out loud so important? I mean, can't we just practice in our heads?
Well, it's about training your brain and your mouth to work together, making English feel more natural over time.
It's that physical act of speaking that makes the difference.
Exactly. And it suggests a few different ways to practice speaking out loud every day.
Like what?
Well, first it suggests reading out loud.
Okay, so grabbing a book, article, anything really.
Yes. And it says choose something you enjoy reading, go slowly, focus on pronunciation, and if you come across a word you don't know, look it up and repeat it a few times.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're not just reading, you're actively engaging with the language, focusing on the sounds and how to say the words correctly.
Right. And it actually says this helps improve not just your speaking, but your listening, your vocabulary, and even your understanding of grammar.
Wow. It's a multitasking language learning activity.
It really is. Then it introduces this technique called shadowing.
Shadowing. I haven't heard of that one.
It's basically listening to an English podcast or YouTube video and repeating what you hear almost immediately without pausing.
Yeah, that sounds challenging.
It can be at first.
Mm.
But the goal is to not just understand what's being said, but to actually copy the rhythm, the tone, the speed, and the pronunciation of the speaker.
So you're trying to sound like a native speaker, essentially mimicking their way of speaking.
Exactly. And it says this helps your English sound more natural, like you're not translating in your head, but actually thinking and speaking in English.
I can see how that would be really beneficial. But what if I can't keep up? I mean, native speakers can speak pretty fast sometimes.
Right, so it suggests starting with short, clear clips. Maybe even slow down the playback speed at first if you need to. And it recommends focusing on just sentence or two at a time, pausing if you need to, until you get more comfortable.
Okay, that makes it seem more manageable. So you're training your ears to pick up the nuances of spoken English and training your mouth to reproduce those sounds.
And it reassures listeners that it's totally normal not to catch every word at first. It's a process. And it also suggests that writing the sentence down first can be helpful for some people.
So you can visually see the words as you're hearing and repeating them.
Exactly. And again, the key here is consistency. It says even 5 to 10 minutes a day can make a difference over time.
So incorporating these techniques into your daily routine, even in small chunks, can lead to big results.
Right. And then, for those times when you might not have a podcast or video handy, the transcript suggests simply describing your day out loud.
So just like talking to yourself, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So like, I woke up at 7 a.m., I brushed my teeth, I made breakfast, or today I'm going to the market, I need to buy vegetables and milk.
Everyday activities.
Right. And it explains that doing this consistently can help you build sentences more quickly and start thinking more naturally in English.
So it's building that fluency and spontaneity in your speech.
Exactly. And then it has another suggestion. Pick a topic and just talk about it out loud for 1 to 2 minutes.
Any topic.
Yeah. Something simple, your favorite food, a childhood memory, your plans for the weekend. And the key is to keep speaking, even if you get stuck or don't know the exact word.
So it's about pushing past that hesitation and finding different ways to express your ideas.
Right. It's about training your brain to be more flexible with the language.
I like that. So many practical exercises. It's really encouraging.
And the overall message here is to build that daily habit of speaking out loud, even if it's just for 10 to 15 minutes.
Consistent practice is key.
Okay, so now for something that might feel a bit more intimidating. The transcript talks about the importance of recording your voice.
Oh, wow. That one can be tough. I mean, who really likes listening to themselves speak? It can be cringeworthy.
Yeah, I totally get it. But the transcript argues that this is an underrated but incredibly effective method. It says that listening back to yourself allows you to spot things you might not notice while you're actually speaking.
Okay, like what kinds of things?
Well, it says you can pick up on things like pronunciation errors, hesitations, filler words like and just generally get a better sense of how smoothly you're speaking.
So it's like having an objective ear listening to yourself.
Exactly. And it gives really simple instructions. Just use the voice recorder on your phone, pick a topic, and talk.
Any topic.
Yeah, it suggests things like describing your day, like today I woke up early, or maybe talking about your dreams or goals for the future.
That's a good idea. It's a way to practice expressing more complex thoughts in English.
Right. And then, this is really important, it says listen back with curiosity, not judgment. It's not about beating yourself up for every little mistake.
So be kind to yourself.
Exactly. Notice the areas where you might want to focus your practice, but also acknowledge the progress you've made. And it even suggests recording yourself speaking about the same topic again later on so you can hear the difference.
Oh, that's a great idea. It's a way to track your progress and see how much you've improved.
And it highlights that this practice not only helps you catch and fix mistakes, but also builds your self-confidence.
Because you can actually hear yourself speaking English, and you might surprise yourself with how well you do.
Exactly. And it explains that over time, this helps your brain get used to forming thoughts in English.
Which can then lead to more natural and automatic speaking in real conversations.
Right. So recording your voice is a really valuable tool for self-assessment and improvement. Okay, the transcript then goes back to the idea of shadowing practice, but gives a more detailed explanation this time.
Right, we touched on shadowing earlier. It's about repeating what you hear a native speaker say.
Exactly. And it calls it a simple yet incredibly powerful technique.
Simple but powerful. I'm intrigued.
Right. And it clearly defines shadowing. Listen to a native speaker and repeat immediately without pausing or overthinking.
So it's about mimicking them as closely as possible.
All right. And it emphasizes that the goal isn't just to understand the words, but to copy the rhythm, the tone, and the speed of the speaker.
So it's about internalizing the music of English.
Exactly. It's about training your mouth, your tongue, and your brain to work together in real time, to pick up on those subtle nuances that make you sound more like a native speaker.
I can see how that would be really helpful for developing a more natural-sounding accent.
And it highlights another benefit, which is improved listening skills.
Oh, yeah, because you have to be really focused to catch every word and sound.
Right. And when you listen more effectively, it directly benefits your speaking. But shadowing can be challenging, so it gives some tips for beginners. It says to start with short and simple materials, maybe videos or podcasts that are specifically designed for English learners where the speakers talk slowly and clearly.
Okay, so not jumping into a super fast, complicated news broadcast right away.
Exactly. And it suggests starting with just one or two sentences at a time, pausing the audio if you need to, until you get more comfortable shadowing longer phrases.
So break it down into manageable chunks.
Right. And it reassures listeners that it's normal not to catch every word at first.
So don't get discouraged if you have to go back and listen again a few times.
Exactly. And it even suggests that writing down the sentence first can be helpful.
To help you visualize the words.
Right. And, the key here is consistency. It says even 5 to 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference.
It's about building those neural pathways and making English feel more natural in your mouth.
And it says shadowing is a great way to prepare for real conversations because it helps you build sentences faster and become more comfortable with speaking without translating in your head.
So it's about training your brain to think and respond directly in English.
Exactly. And the beauty of this technique is that you can do it pretty much anywhere, anytime, just with your phone and some earphones. Now, ready for another slightly unconventional technique?
Bring it on. I'm loving all these practical tips.
Okay, so the transcript talks about speaking with a mirror or camera.
Oh, wow. That sounds a little scary, like actually see myself speak English.
Yeah, it can feel a bit awkward at first, but the transcript presents this as a really powerful tool for improving your confidence, your fluency, and your overall comfort level with speaking.
Okay, I'm willing to try anything. What's the benefit of using a mirror?
Well, it helps you become more aware of how you communicate nonverbally.
You mean things like body language?
Exactly. You can see your facial expressions, your gestures, your posture, and how they all play into your overall message.
So it's about being more aware how you're coming across, not just the words you're saying.
Right. And it also helps you practice making eye contact, which can feel weird at first when you're just looking at yourself, but it actually helps build that confidence for when you're talking to someone else.
Okay, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
And what do I actually do? Just stand in front of the mirror and talk?
pretty much. It says you can talk about anything, your day, your goals for the future, your weekend plans. You can even pretend you're giving a speech about your favorite hobby or something.
So it's combining all those things we talked about before, speaking out loud, thinking in English, and becoming more aware of your nonverbal communication.
Exactly. And if you use your phone's camera to record yourself, you can watch it back afterwards and really observe your pronunciation, any filler words you might be using, whether you're smiling or using natural hand gestures.
It's like getting feedback from a coach, but the coach is yourself.
And the important thing to remember is that the goal isn't perfection.
It's about practicing, observing, and making small improvements over time.
Exactly. It's about getting more comfortable with the act of speaking English. And it says that the initial discomfort you might feel will fade away with practice.
And as you become more comfortable, your confidence grows. It makes sense.
And it suggests making this a regular routine. Maybe spend 5 minutes a day talking to yourself in the mirror or record a short video diary once a week. Just little things to keep that practice going.
I love how all these techniques are so simple to implement, yet they can have such a big impact. Okay, so what if I'm ready to start practicing with someone else? Does the transcript offer any advice for that?
It does. It has a whole section about finding a safe speaking partner.
Safe speaking partner, what does that mean?
Well, it emphasizes that this doesn't have to be someone who is a perfect English speaker or a qualified teacher.
That's a relief. It's hard enough finding someone to practice with, let alone someone with perfect English.
Right. It actually says that sometimes someone who's also learning English or who understands the challenges you're facing can be a better partner.
Because they're more likely to be patient and understanding.
Exactly. And it defines a safe speaking partner as someone who won't judge you harshly for your mistakes, who will support and encourage you, and who's also willing to learn and grow alongside you.
That sounds like the ideal learning environment. So where do you find this magical safe speaking partner?
Well, if you don't know anyone in person, the transcript suggests joining English learning communities online.
Oh yeah, those can be great. There's so many groups on social media and language exchange apps where you can connect to people from all over the world who are also learning English.
Exactly. And it says not only can you find speaking partners, but you can also make new friends and learn about different cultures.
It's like a global community of learners. I love that idea. What are some other tips for finding a good partner?
Well, it says to aim for short speaking sessions at first, maybe just 5 or 10 minutes.
To keep it from feeling overwhelming.
Right. And it suggests choosing topics in advance or using conversation prompts to keep things flowing.
Okay, so like having a plan for what to talk about.
And the big emphasis here is on communication, building confidence, and enjoying the process.
So it's not about being perfect or correcting each other's every mistake.
Exactly. It's about supporting each other and having fun while you learn.
That makes sense. Learning should be enjoyable, right?
Absolutely. And it talks about the long-term benefits of having a regular speaking partner, thinking more spontaneously in English, feeling less nervous about speaking in public, being able to respond more quickly in conversations, and using more natural-sounding expressions.
Wow, so many benefits. It's definitely worth the effort to find a good partner. Okay, so what's the final piece of advice from this amazing transcript?
It ends by talking about setting small speaking challenges.